Welcome to Ask Barbie, where I answer your burning questions about gynecology, contraception, and menopause. I'm an obstetrician, gynecologist, and gynecologic surgeon, so I'm well versed in all of these things. Today's question is, what's the best time to start HRT for menopause? Now, I'm in the habit of simplifying things. I see no benefit in giving you a complicated, confusing, and convoluted answer to something really simple. So as usual, I will go back to basics and put this into perspective so that you can see the logic and how to consider your options. Think about your reproductive life. It all begins with puberty. Puberty is when it becomes possible for you to get pregnant. Well, next comes sex. Heterosexual sex, that is. Heterosexual sex makes it likely that you will get pregnant. If you get pregnant, your reproductive system is in full force with your estrogen and progestogen at their zenith. And then, at some point, you will probably consider pregnancy undesirable. So that's when you try to prevent pregnancy. At some point after that, you're going to reach perimenopause. During perimenopause, you can still get pregnant if you don't do something to prevent it. But you also begin losing the estrogen and progestogen that produced your reproductive potential in the first place. Perimenopause is when your estrogen and progesterone are on a chaotic roller coaster, trying to disappear and ruining your life all the while. And finally, you reach post-menopause. And post-menopause is when your estrogen and progestogen are gone, gone, gone forever. They have gone from zenith to zero. So, how would you answer if I asked the question, what's the best time to start using contraception to prevent pregnancy? You would answer me by designating initiation of sexual activity as the time to start using contraception to prevent pregnancy. It would be simple, straightforward, and completely logical. There's nothing complicated about it. The fact is that during your reproductive life, you can get pregnant anytime you are not preventing pregnancy with some kind of contraception. And having heterosexual intercourse without contraception would put you at risk for an unplanned pregnancy. If you had heterosexual intercourse without contraception, you wouldn't be a bit surprised if you got pregnant. It's the normal expectation. And unless there's some kind of impediment to pregnancy, it's almost inevitable. So the choice is between preventing pregnancy before getting pregnant or terminating pregnancy after getting pregnant. Most people agree that the more efficient of the two is preventing pregnancy before getting pregnant. Now, once you've had all the children you want, you're likely to do something to prevent future pregnancy. The contraception you use when you have finished your childbearing is likely to be permanent or long-term in nature. You might do something like insertion of an intrauterine device or tying your fallopian tubes or long-term estrogen plus progestogen contraception. The fact is, once you're at the point of knowing that you don't want to get pregnant again, you'd most likely start right then doing something to ensure that you don't get pregnant again. If you don't utilize a contraceptive method that ensures prevention of pregnancy, getting pregnant would face you with a dilemma about terminating the pregnancy. So rather than preventing the pregnancy before the fact, you would have to try to reverse the pregnancy after the fact. So if you didn't want to get pregnant, you would use pregnancy prevention. Well, when your reproductive life is over, your next phase of life is going to be menopause. So why shouldn't you handle it in the same way? These phases of your reproductive life are automatic. You could say that they're on autopilot. And our question is, what's the best time to start HRT for menopause? Well, see, some things in life are already on autopilot, and other things you have to put on autopilot. Autopilot is when you set the stage so that everything takes care of itself, and you don't have to give it any thought. It's a set it and forget it system. So why not employ an autopilot preparation and protection program for the automatic process of perimenopause and postmenopause? You can prevent it and forget it. When you lose your estrogen and progestogen at perimenopause and postmenopause, there are detrimental consequences. Estrogen was your fountain of youth. It kept you young on the inside and on the outside. When you lose your estrogen, you start aging rapidly on the inside and the outside. The outside aging entails symptoms of estrogen deficiency that span from your head to your toes, from your home life to your work life, and from your physical well-being to your emotional well-being. The inside aging involves aging of your heart, bones, and brain. And this rapid aging of your heart, bones, and brain puts you at very high risk for heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. So the time at which you start HRT for menopause determines whether or not you ever begin developing these symptoms or these 3 diseases of estrogen deficiency. The earlier in your perimenopause you start taking adequate hormone replacement therapy to prevent the symptoms, the fewer symptoms you endure. And the earlier in your perimenopause you start taking adequate hormone replacement therapy to prevent the diseases, the fewer diseases you endure. So the question, what's the best time to start HRT for menopause, is really a question about prevention of bothersome symptoms and fatal diseases. Perimenopause is when you start losing all your estrogen and progestogen. There's no doubt it's going to happen. It's as certain as death and taxes. And it can happen at any age. Most women do not recognize perimenopause as perimenopause when it begins. They waste years and years failing to label it for what it is. For most women, the transition into menopause begins in their late 30s or early 40s, but the vast majority don't acknowledge it as perimenopause until their early 50s. This results in unnecessary symptoms of estrogen deficiency and unnecessary diseases of estrogen deficiency. And because recognizing perimenopause is so difficult, it's much easier to just start covering your bases for enduring future menopause at the same time you cover your bases for preventing future pregnancies. The 2 hormones that will disappear in autopilot fashion are estrogen and progestogen. And when they disappear, you'll need to replace them. But the problem is that you won't know when you need to replace them until some damage is done. The whole idea of hormone replacement for menopause is to bridge the gap between having your own hormones and replacing them with hormone replacement so that your body never knows they disappeared. So if you know you're going to lose your estrogen and progestogen, why not replace them as soon as you're finished with childbearing? Think about pairing birth control after your last child with HRT before your last period. It's simple, straightforward, it's autopilot. When you have your last child, make preparations and plans to ensure that it's your last child. And when you have your last child, make preparations and plans to ensure that you have adequate hormone replacement when you have your last period. When I was a kid, there was a television commercial on Doublemint gum. And the tagline was two, two, two mints in one. The idea was that you got two flavors in one gum. Well, why not apply that tagline along with the autopilot idea for answering what's the best time to start HRT for menopause? Think about it. When you get to the point in your life when you no longer want any children, you're likely to choose some form of birth control that is permanent or long-lasting. In other words, you'll put your pregnancy prevention on autopilot. You might get an intrauterine device. You might get your fallopian tubes tied. Or you might start estrogen and progesterone hormonal birth control. Well, estrogen plus progesterone hormonal birth control is the very same thing as hormone replacement therapy for menopause. It's just a difference in dosage, with birth control being the higher dosage of the two. And alas, that's precisely what you need for perimenopause. So why not use estrogen plus progesterone birth control as a way to start your HRT for menopause? It would be two prevents in one. The two hormones that will disappear during perimenopause and postmenopause are estrogen and progesterone. They will go from zenith to zero. You'll need both if you want hormone replacement therapy for menopause. And if you use them for permanent birth control as well as hormone replacement for menopause, you'll accomplish two prevents in one. You'll prevent pregnancy and you'll prevent all the ravages of peri and post-menopause. No woman can predict when her perimenopause will begin, and it can happen at any age. The fact is that a fall in your estrogen and progesterone from zenith to zero prevents pregnancy, but also augments your risk for 3 fatal diseases. Additionally, this zenith to zero drop in estrogen and progesterone also creates a zenith to zero drop in your quality of life. So, since perimenopause is the time when you can still get pregnant, why not make your automatic pregnancy protection double as automatic perimenopause protection? Postmenopause is when your ovaries stop producing both eggs and sex hormones. Postmenopause makes it impossible for you to get pregnant. But this doesn't occur overnight. There are 2 to 10 years of perimenopause between fertility and infertility. Perimenopause is the process of becoming infertile, and it can take 2 to 10 years. And that entire 2 to 10 years is rife with horrible symptoms that disrupt every aspect of your life. And while these 2 to 10 years are ongoing, the loss of your estrogen is also putting you at risk for heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. This is because estrogen prevents these 3 fatal diseases of estrogen deficiency. When you stop having your periods, you start having the symptoms and diseases of menopause. So why not start automatic disease prevention when you start automatic pregnancy prevention? The cold hard fact is that waiting to start HRT for menopause means running the risk of enduring a long list of miserable symptoms, as well as putting yourself at risk for 3 fatal diseases when you could have planned ahead and prevented all of that. So just as you use pregnancy prevention if you don't want to get pregnant, why don't you start HRT when you don't want to get pregnant? That would be equivalent to saying, if you don't want the consequences of losing your estrogen, go ahead and start replacing your estrogen. The earlier, the better. Why wait? Why not employ the two, two prevents in one? So the short answer to this question, what's the best time to start HRT for menopause, is after you've had your last child and know that you never want to get pregnant again. That way you cover all the bases, bridge all the gaps, and avoid any untoward consequences that would ensue when menopause creeps up on you unexpectedly, little by little, wreaking damage to your heart, bones, and brain all the while. In essence, when you finish your childbearing and choose permanent contraception, start your HRT for menopause right then and there. And that way you'll be prepared for everything. Fortunately, many of your best HRT options for your entire perimenopausal life are estrogen plus progestogen hormonal contraceptive options. And that constitutes two prevents in one. I hope this made it fun. Bye!